All right. Hello, Belinda.
Hi, Logan. Great to see you.
Hello, everyone in our audience tonight. Welcome to the final reading of Saskatchewan Book Week 2022. Um, as people who have watched some of the earlier presentations may know, I am Logan McKay. I'm the Book Week coordinator for SaskBooks, Saskatchewan's nonprofit creative industry association for book publishing. Thank you all for coming. We are honored to have Belinda Betker here to read from her book, Phases, published by Shadowpaw Press in Regina as part of our Book Week events. And before we get into the reading, I'd like to just make a few acknowledgements and introduce Belinda a bit. So first things first. SaskBooks head office is located on Treaty 4 territory in Regina, and SaskBooks' work spans the whole province and lands covered by Treaties 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10, including the traditional lands of the Nahiawak, Anishinaabeg, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, Dene, and Métis people. And as part of our commitment to decolonization, we invite everyone to read the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action and to consider what actions we might take to dismantle colonialism. And in a few moments, we will put some links into the chat that'll lead you to those calls to action. And it's especially important on this day, as we all know, it's Truth and Reconciliation today, or Orange Shirt Day. Yeah, it's important today most of all, but always important that we recognize that the importance of this day and everything. So yeah. And then I would like to acknowledge and thank our funders, the Department of Canadian Heritage via the Canada Book Fund, and Young Canada Works Building Careers in Heritage, Creative Saskatchewan, and the Canada Council for the Arts, without whose support Book Week would not be possible. We would also like to thank Shadowpaw Press, the publisher of Phases, who brought it out in this new edition. All right. A little bit of intro, Belinda. Belinda's poetry book, Phases, was a finalist for 2 Saskatchewan Book Awards in 2020. Phases tells the journey of a tomboy's life from childhood through to coming out in midlife and performing as a drag king. Belinda's poetry is also published in various anthologies, literary journals, and chapbooks. She has won awards for her haiku. She is a founding and longtime board member of the Saskatoon Writers Collective and a founding and active member of 2 Saskatoon writing groups, Sisters Inc. and Obsessors. Belinda lives in Saskatoon with her wife and their rescue dog, a Springer Spaniel Terrier cross. All right. So that's my intro. I hand it off to you, Belinda.
Thank you very much, Logan. So good evening and welcome everyone to this evening's Sask Book Week presentation. I'm Belinda Betker, as you've heard, and I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to introduce the second edition of my newly revised and expanded gender-bending poetic memoir entitled Phases. Tonight I'll also talk about writing as a path to my authentic self, particularly as an out and proud poet. I'll talk about why I added 29 new poems to the second edition of Phases since the first edition of it came out in October of 2019. I'll intersperse my narrative with related poems from both the first and second editions, concluding with some poems about my years as a performing drag king and a slideshow loop of drag king family photos. I'll also advise you now of some adult content and language in some of my upcoming poems. Before all that, I just want to say some thank yous to all of you for watching, of course, to Logan at SaskBooks for inviting me to read tonight, to Edward Willett of Shadowpaw Press, who supported my book's revitalized new life, to Mickey Mickelson of Creative Edge for Shadowpaw's publicity and promotion, to Monica McLean for putting together my slideshow, and to the following drag kings who gave permission for their photos to be used in this presentation tonight. First of all, to my drag brother, Ben Dover, as well as the kings Just in Time, Nikolai Yusakov, and Richard Everhard. I also credit Deborah Marshall as the professional photographer of the drag king photos. Just as Phases is a poetic memoir about my life story, the book itself has its own story. The first edition, as you heard, came out in October 2019 with the standing room only launch at McNally Robertson in Saskatoon. My guest reader that night was Cindy Clark, reading from her first poetry book, The Blue Dress, and in January 2020, we also launched our books together in Prince Albert. That Prince Albert reading was planned to be the first event of our book tour together, but then many things interfered with our plans, including my publisher closing down in February, and we all remember the COVID pandemic declaration in March that shut almost everything else down. My book languished in limbo, but I couldn't seem to stop writing new poems that fit into some of the gaps of the original book. I started to imagine how Phases would look with the new poems added, and when Ed at Shadowpaw Press became my new publisher this year, he was enthusiastic about me adding new work. That's how and why I added the 29 new poems, a fourth section, and a few new stanzas to my personal manifesto poem, Why a Parade, which I will read a little later on in this presentation. I'd like to talk a bit about how I believe it's valuable to share our stories, our life stories, with others when we get the opportunity to do so. Our stories are our truths, our identities, and our bonds to others. No matter how similar or different our individual experiences are, if we take the time to truly listen to each other, we can learn to relate to one another and build connections that deepen our sense of belonging. Being genuine enough to disclose our vulnerability and our personal experiences helps develop empathy, which can lead to acceptance. It was a fearful thing to put some of my life stories into poems for a book to share with the world, but the payoff and connections to others has made it so very worthwhile. I'd like you all now to think of how you'd describe your life in a sentence or less. What would be the elevator pitch for the book about your life? How would you express your life in a 6-word memoir? When I did the 6-word memoir challenge, I narrowed it down to a few options. The first one was literally the cliche, my life is an open book, which amused me on several levels, but I wanted something original, which evolved into this: tomboy, stepmom, coming out, drag king. These 6 words became the framework for my phases, a chronological memoir in verse about the journey of my life from a tomboy childhood through to coming out in midlife and eventually performing as a drag king under my male stage names of Dyke Van Dyck or Cass Butchery, or sometimes my female stage name of Honey Glazed Dover, when I really gender bended as a woman performing as a man performing as a woman. I was raised in a traditional household where my dad was the head of the family and my mom was referred to as a housewife. My beliefs of traditional gender roles and the differences between girls and boys and women and men were deeply ingrained from a young age. This is the first poem in the new edition. Girls and boys when I'm 5. Mom and I are girls, and Dad and my brothers are boys. Girls have VGs, and boys have PPs. Girls wear panties and dresses, and boys wear underpants and jeans. Mums are housewives, and dads have jobs. Girls help mums make beds, wash dishes and clothes, sweep floors and vacuum, and make pickles in jars. And boys play catch with dads. Girls play with dolls and Barbies, and look after brothers who play Lego, toy cars, guns, and cowboys and Indians. Girls grow up and get married and have kids, and boys grow up and get jobs and get married and buy cars and trailers and boats. Girls get really old and gray and wrinkled and become grandmas, and boys become whiskered grandpas, and then they all die. In my early school years, I was a shy and sensitive kid who was happiest when I could hide away to read books and listen to music. I was a grade A student, but I also enjoyed volleyball, dodgeball, tetherball, and broomball. I was teased and bullied and called various names: tomboy, bookworm, egghead, and teacher's pet. But I loved learning and reading and exams and writing. But in particular, I loved poetry, especially from the time in grade 3 when I received both an A plus and a gold star on a poetry assignment. Writing something of my own and being praised and rewarded was exciting. That was the first time I felt the magic of my own words and imagination and rhythm. I was hooked on poetry and started to include it in my diary. As well as secretly writing poetry, I was a voracious reader. I tried to relate to the characters I read about and vicariously lived different lives through them. But I never read about someone that seemed enough like me. A me, a, a me I didn't have words for at the time. A kid who wondered why I couldn't be both a girl and a boy. Here's a poem about a common childhood pastime: dress up. Mum's favorite skirt, brown sugared wool, rickrack and embroidery loop a traceable path round and round the flaring hem. Her favorite blouse, satiny white, cute tomato printed between winking red tomato faces. Gleaming pearl buttons fasten the front and 3/4 length sleeves. I button her top over my chest, flat profile in the sliding closet door mirrors. Gyrate my hips to swish the skirt's hula hoop fullness. Dad's side of the closet. His shirt sleeves dangle from the ends of my arms. Ties reach my knees. His prized snap brim hat covers my face. Years later, my mother remakes her skirt into a hassock cover, but her blouse hangs in the back of my out-of-season closet, while Dad's hat rests on the highest shelf in a dust-free box. Jumping ahead to when I was 18 years old, I was a member of the Canadian Naval Reserve and posted to Halifax, where I met and dated a regular forces sailors. We married when I was just 20, but I spent a lot of time on my own when my husband was posted away at sea for sometimes months at a time. My time was focused on work and friends, and I soon realized that my life was much more interesting and enjoyable when my husband was away at sea than when he was back at home. This poem is called Slow Pitch. Jade's the new girl at work, 20 to my 22. She's been car shopping, asks what I like better, Trans Ams or Camaros. Trans Ams, I shrug, not knowing the difference. The following week, she invites me out for a ride in her new Glacier Blue TA, opens the door for me, offers me driving lessons anytime. Later, she picks me up at home to head to the ballpark. I'm the pitcher for our Department of Supply and Services slow pitch team. Public serpents lettered large and white across the back of our tight red scoop neck t-shirts. My nickname, Belle, in soft flocked black print above my left breast. Always the innuendos on the evening ball diamonds about what we young women, all in our 20s, should supply, who we should service on the mostly male teams from other government department offices we played against. I liked nothing better than to strike them out. All through the season, Jade drives me the long way home, talking about nothing much, until the evening she slides her hand across my thigh, parks in front of my house. Can I come in, she asks. I know your husband's at sea, and I'd love to pinch it. Although I found women more interesting than men, I've been very socialized to believe that a woman's role was to get a job, get married, then get pregnant and stay home to be a housewife and look after kids. I liked working and earning my own money too much to ever think about not having a job, and I resisted the pressure to start planning a family. I also personally objected to judgments and expectations of others about women in general. This poem is titled Bad Girl. Suppose you're 5 and Mum says it's bad to let anyone see you naked, but you get sick and Mum says, except for me and the doctor. and you keep getting sicker, and mom takes you to emergency and says, except for me and the doctor and nurse. Suppose you're 6 and you point down below your belly, and mom says, no one's supposed to touch you there. But the older neighbor boy says, let's play doctor, and you be a nurse. Later he says, it's a secret you can't tell, because you're a naughty girl and you're very, very bad. Suppose your grade 1 teacher is a nun and says bad little girls will burn in hell, and you remember how much it hurt when you burnt your hand on the stove. Burning scares you, and you raise your hand for permission to go to the bathroom, but she says no. So you pee through your panties and tights, and she slaps you, calls you bad little girl. Suppose your grade 7 teacher is also the principal, which means man, and he also teaches sex education. He says, any of you can come ask me anything in private any time. So you gather a few classmates together after school and ask him to explain wet dreams. Afterwards, you laugh hysterically with your friends about his embarrassment. You're such a bad girl. Suppose you're 16, double dating with your boyfriend at the drive-in. His best friend and his girlfriend are all too soon fucking in the back seat. So your boyfriend coaxes your head into his lap, forces himself into your mouth, moves your head up and down, moans, you're doing good, you bad, bad girl. Suppose you're 20 and you agree to get married, mostly because all your friends are, and it seems to be the thing to do. Suppose your husband insists you be a slut in the sheets, but a lady in the streets. Suppose you bristle and seethe about his expectations. Suppose your own desire leads a different direction. Suppose you finally say, I'm my own person. Suppose you say, no one else is in charge of me. Suppose you tell yourself, I'm nobody's bad girl. Suppose you're that kind of woman. Just suppose. I left my marriage and moved on, but I wasn't much wiser at first to my relationship choices. I stumbled through a number of other doomed relationships before meeting a full-time single dad with 2 young preschool children. At 32 years old, I thought I'd finally done things right. I was married again, but now with children. I loved being a mom and having an interesting job and maintaining a family home. I became immersed with new friends, feminists I met through International Women's Day, Take Back the Night, women's spirituality groups, and folk dance circles, all women-only groups where I felt at home in a way I never had before, with a sense of ease and comfort that was new to me. Then a health crisis in my early 40s resulted in the surgery I didn't really want to have. I wrote my first poem in almost 20 years while I was still in the hospital. During my long recuperation at home, I had time to think deeply about who I was. This poem is titled Lesbian Friends. Friends help out after surgery, bring casseroles and baking, do laundry, pitch in to hire weekly maid services, help me up the stairs, make chai tea, visit through the afternoons. Why do most of your friends seem to be lesbians? My husband asks. My friends are who they are, I say. They're strong, compassionate, powerful, and interesting women. They're broad-minded feminists, and we think alike. Interesting you say broad-minded, he replies. That's not a pun, I say. Many of my friends just happen to also be lesbians. Would you rather my friends were men? Of course not, he says. It's just odd. Your women friends are mostly gay. Mostly, I think to myself. So am I. While recovering from surgery at home, I listened to music every waking moment. I discovered women artists whose lyrics I connected to deeply, most notably Farron, Heather Bishop, Holly Near, Annie DeFranco, and the Indigo Girls. It was no coincidence that the music of lesbian artists resonated so intensely within me. As I listened over and over to these women, something became very apparent to me. I admitted to myself that I didn't feel right about my life. Although I still loved being a mum, I couldn't ignore anymore that I was unhappily married. The day I first heard Katie Lang's song Constant Craving on the radio, I was riveted. The song connected to a deeper part of me and revealed another profound layer of meaning. I realized that the biggest problem I'd had in my relationships with men was that I'd been having relationships with men. I acknowledged some core truths to myself, that I didn't want to be married anymore, that women were, and always had been, much more interesting to me, and that whoever or whatever I was definitely not straight. Here's a poem about that phase of my life. Constant Craving, after Katie Lang. My husband and children surround me as I unwrap birthday gifts, a portable CD player, and Ingenue, Katie Lang's newest recording. Her voice and lyrics illuminate my darkest phases. An inner magnet pulls me to parenthood, to the two children I love fiercely, but not their dad. I'm a full-time stepmom. How can I leave? Leaving him would mean leaving them. Alone at home, I play the song on repeat, sobbing. I know now what my constant craving has always been. To accept what I'd never dared admit to myself before. To be who I really am beneath my skin, a lesbian. Meanwhile, I kept writing poems, I joined writing groups, and started new ones of my own. I joined the Saskatchewan Writers Guild and received feedback on my poetry from the writer-in-residence at the Saskatoon Public Library. I was excited to be writing again and prioritized it in my life, and I finally left my second marriage. Coming out to myself in my early 40s was a lot like being a teenager again, exciting and nerve-wracking and tumultuous. I cut my hair short, quit wearing makeup, and changed how I dressed. I involved myself in the local gay community, went to gay dances, and started dating women. And then came the challenge of telling other people about the new me. This poem is titled Coming Out. It's been months since we worked together, but now we take a coffee break walk along the river. You ask me, what's new? You're speechless after my reply. I've met someone, a woman. September trees spill fire over water. Reflections waver. Finally you say, but we can still be friends, right? I stop in my tracks. Yes, absolutely. I don't like you like that. And after laughter you ask, which one of you plays the man? I recall that classic routine. Who's on first? What's on second? I don't know's on third. But now I'm playing the outfield. As I became more involved in the local gay community, I made new friends and heard their coming out stories. I joined the National Rainbow Health Coalition and became a board member. I traveled around the country to meetings and went to Montreal for an international queer health conference. This poem is titled A Man Passing. So beastly hot in Montreal, I walk into the first barbershop I find on St. Catherine. No, no, he says, but unsure whether he means women's cuts or cutting women's hair, I mime a clipper trimming close to my scalp. He shrugs, leads me to the cracked black vinyl chair by the window where the sun scorches in, my eyes shut in the heat. J'ai fini, he says as he whips the dark cape away from my brother's face in the mirror. Merci, monsieur, as I pay and leave. Back at my hotel, bonjour, monsieur, say the doorman, the concierge, the housekeeper in the hallway. At the drugstore gay bar that night, it's men who ask me to dance, like I'm one of them. My life story became a crucial part of my writing life. Writers often hear the phrase, write what you know. And what I know is that sharing some of my life story through poetry connected me to both the queer community and the writing community, and a very diverse group of people beyond that. It wasn't easy at first to write about awkwardness and not fitting in and taking way too long to find my place in the world. But writing my way through dozens of journals, filling page after page with angst and anger and fear and hope wasn't enough. I yearned for a way to connect with people, to feel heard and perhaps understood. It took a long time for me to be brave enough to write some of my authentic self into poetry, and even longer to share that in open mics and other readings. It was terrifying at first, and sometimes still is, but I always feel as rewarded as when I got that A+ and gold star back in grade 3. This next poem was written specifically in response to a question I've heard for years, and this poem has become my personal manifesto poem. Why a parade? For the 4-year-old girl who rejects her dolls and miniature ponies for toy cars, trains, and Lego, and the 7-year-old boy who would rather skate Lutz and axle jumps than play hockey, and the 12-year-old tomboy who cries when her mother insists it's time you wear a bra, and the 13-year-old who has less in common with the guys than his girl friends, and the 14-year-old who's bored with her friends giggling about really cute guys, and the 18-year-old boy who obsesses about wanting breasts and no penis, and the 25-year-old guy lingering over the glossy pages of Men's Health, and the 31-year-old trans woman who doesn't know how to tell her family she wants sex reassignment surgery, and the 38-year-old wife who agonizes about how to leave her husband for a younger woman, and the 45-year-old husband who cruises dark city parks and for the men he hooks up with, and the 56-year-old widow who discovers romantic love with her longtime lady friend, and the 62-year-old pansexual who's in between relationships, and the 74-year-old man keeping a hospital vigil for his friend and secret lover, and the 83-year-old self-identified queer and lifelong activist, and the 91-year-old in a nursing home afraid to be out of the closet. For all of them and all the others who don't identify with gender and sexual norms, who don't fit the stereotypes, labels, and acronyms, who are still discovering their true selves, for all of them and all of us and all our allies, that's why a parade. As I became more involved in the local LGBTQ+ community, I also attended Saskatoon drag shows and became intrigued with the culture. Here's an excerpt from a long poem about my fascination with drag performance. It's titled Drag King. Drag King. Remember watching your first drag show? Drag queens, elegant in elaborate outfits, cleavage, bounce and sachet, high heels, glittering flash dance, then the drag king. Sideburns, goatee, confident bulge in his crotch. That's when the seed was planted, something that expanded your ribs, spread across your shoulders, swelled in your groin, that feeling some days of being different. It's not clothes that make a man, but your carriage, broad shoulders, make you believe you can pull it off, the illusion, passing as a man. Don't think too much, don't overanalyze, but you might. When you pass through women's wear to the men's department in Value Village, Village Green, to try on hardly worn suits, wonder about the men who shrugged them off. Start questioning, asking around, talking about drag. If your girlfriend threatens, I'll leave if you start doing drag, hide your smile, all the more reason. Don't worry about definitions, identifiers, labels, sex deviant, gender anomaly dyke, lesbian identified boy, non-operative female bodied transgender outlaw, gender bender, gender fucker, gender queer. Tonight, it's just you and the mirror. So that was an excerpt from the beginning of the longer Drag King poem in the book. This next poem is about my evolution from being in the drag show audience to practicing male drag at home, and then to actually performing in public for the first time at Divas as a drag king in Saskatoon. This poem is titled In Drag. What possesses me to cut clippings of my hair, chop them finer with manicure scissors, save them in a clear pill bottle in my medicine cabinet? What possesses me on Saturday night to gaze in the mirror, darken my eyebrows with mascara, glue hair clippings into the shape of sideburns, mustache, goatee. What possesses me to bind my breasts, put on a man's shirt, tie, and suit, top it all off with the 50s snap brim hat my father wore before I was born? What possesses me to strut down the alley, to the gay bar, stroll on stage, to lip sync popular new versions of old jazz standards? What possesses me is them, cheering and whistling, begging for more, gay, trans, straight, shouting out, they love me. I have one final poem tonight. This is dedicated to my wife, Beth. This is called The Right Woman. Ask her out to a drag show. Be in drag to go pick her up. If she smiles when she opens the door, you're off to a good start. Introduce her to your drag family at the bar. Gauge her reaction to them, their reaction to her. When the floor clears after you finish your last number in the show, invite her to dance. If it's a slow song, hold her close. Don't even talk, just move with the music. When you go to get her a drink and your friends say, she never took her eyes off you the whole show, let that sink in. You're intrigued, and the night's getting late. Let her know you'll take her home when she's ready to leave. Let her know you mean your home. If she keeps smiling and hugs you hard, you know she's the one. Marry the woman who loves you, in and out of drag. I've got one more really quick drag poem that I'll add in here. This one is called Ask a Drag King. What drew you to drag? Gender play, fucking with gender, getting fucked like the straight guys getting the girls, for the fame, for the title, for the rush, because it scares the hell out of me. To challenge myself, to entertain, to swagger, to make people laugh, make them think, make them feel, make me feel, to get in touch with my masculine side, to reconnect to my feminine side, to have pockets, to not need a purse, to feel power, to feel safe. So thank you for the privilege tonight of sharing some of my journey through from tomboy to drag king, and for being proud to be out and proud to be a poet. No matter what your orientation is, I encourage you to be brave, dig deep, and live from your most authentic self. Recognize your fears, realize how they're holding you back, and keep your dreams in sight anyway. My book is a manifestation of living my dream of finally being my whole self, a writer and poet, a wife to a wonderful woman, nobody's bad girl, and someone who knows who I want to be every day in my day-to-day life. So I'll just say while the slideshow is still up, this is Richard Everhard, and the other kings were just in time, Ben Dover, Nikolai Yusakov, and we're all there. It was a lot of fun performing in the drag years, and yeah, it was just a unique experience that I will always treasure. So thank you. We've got time now, I think, for some Q&A, and again, thank you. That was a lot of fun.
All right. Hello, everyone again. Yeah, if anyone, first of all, I'd like to say thank you, Belinda. That was really great. As someone who is also in the LGBTQ sphere and thinking about gender and sexuality and everything, your poems are very powerful, and I just want to say that as a personal thank you.
Thank,
In addition to, obviously, thank you for being on Book Week.
it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So let's see. We have Diana says thank you. Leanne says to have pockets and a bunch of heart emojis laughing. Leanne also says, thank you for sharing, Belinda. Congratulations on your second edition.
My phone is blowing up too. I guess people were watching.
Do we have any comments? Maybe from YouTube? Because I see we have a lot of YouTube viewers.
Yeah, I can't tell with this format, who's out there, what's being posted in the chat.
Yeah. Andrea says, this was wonderful, Belinda. And Bruce says, thank you. Such important information and thoughts. Right. I guess
I do have a couple of questions here that people often ask me, so I can just throw them out there. Sometimes that
yeah, for sure.
tweaks things for people. I've been asked a couple of times this week if I'm proud of my book, and I am, of course. But I said I also feel sometimes a little uncomfortable. It's kind of like watching your teenager find their way out into the world, and you want to support them and have them succeed, but you also don't want to interfere with them too much. So it's that kind of, that parental feel, I guess, that I've been feeling this week. And somebody asked me what took me so long to write this first book, and I said never underestimate the paralyzing influence of fear. But look fear in the face and do what you want anyway. What does literary success look like to me? It's personal connection with a reader or listener who values something I've written. I say all the time that connection to others is a big piece of writing and reading. I actually love reading and like reading to an audience, and enjoyed that very much again tonight, even though I can't see you all out there. Somebody asked, what did I edit out of this book? And that was just poems that felt like they weren't working or didn't fit the overall narrative. Some of those poems might have a home somewhere else. Somebody wanted to know if I hide any secrets in my books that only a few people will find, and the answer is yes. And the key theme or message to my book is, when you finally find yourself, just be yourself. It's something we hear over and over and over, but it's easier said than done.
We've got a few questions
Okay.
from Facebook, if you'd like to.
Sure.
Andrea asks, do you have any particular strategies or advice for poets writing about personal or difficult topics?
I'm going to come back to that. Fear is a paralyzing force, but it's really important to face that in however you can and just get over it. And for anybody writing, the first thing to remember is you're writing for yourself first. You choose from there on whether you share it or who you share it with, but you're your own worst critic usually. But just getting it down on paper or however you write, if that's on a screen or on paper, or however you do it, just do it. It's that's another cliche, but you can't get started if you don't sit down and start.
Jillian asks, can you talk a little bit about your sense of place and sense of how your sense of place and sense of self might influence each other?
That's an interesting one. Sense of place. My first thought is that very much comes from a deep deep part of myself, and I mentioned that in some of those poems, or how I came to write them, is that um, really thinking deeply and looking into myself. And some of that was very much writing about it. I talked about journals and journals of pages of angst, and that's very true. You can't see the top shelf of my bookshelf, but that is a lifetime worth of journals full of angst and writing. So place for me is first of all internal. It's inside myself, but it's also where I situate myself in life. Like right now, I'm in my home office, which is a place I love. I spend many hours a day here, but I'm also I'm very fortunate in being able to write in a crowded, loud coffee shop, or the backyard, when the birds are singing, or um, pretty much anywhere. I'm very fortunate because I know that's not um, the way that some people work. But so yeah, places firstly within myself, and then in the environment I choose to be in. And sense of self is just something that took me a long time to come to, but I came to that really through writing, and just pushing myself to face my fears.
Andrea has a comment. I love the aspects of stepmotherhood that you include in your poems. And question from Tamara. I love this entirely. Very inspiring. How would you describe the relationship between your identity and your writing practice? Are you continuing to write poetry with personal topics?
That's an interesting question, because I might sit down with a particular idea or thought in mind about what I want to write about, and that's not necessarily what comes out. And that's what happened after the first edition came out. I would have an idea in mind of something I wanted to write about, and next thing I knew, it was a poem, some of which you heard tonight, that really belonged to that first edition. So it's really a mystery to me. I do sometimes have a specific idea I want to write about, and that happens, and sometimes not. And I have no way of knowing, so I literally have to go with the flow.
Harmony comments. Harmony and Lori say hi, and we love the story. We love the poems. Thanks for the stories within the stories.
Thank you. That's lovely.
And Linda says, Belinda, you always inspire me to write courageously, and so looking forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Are there any more comments or questions by anyone that they want to say to Belinda? I guess I just sort of want to ask, where do you see yourself sort of in the context of LGBT literature?
Um, well, partly as maybe a trailblazer, because I have not read any other drag king poetry. I used to actually perform some of it in drag on a drag night performance, and not a lot of poets in the divas crowd on those nights, but some people, like, it was it was something new and entirely different for them. So I think a bit of a trailblazer in that way that it's not something I'd come across before and haven't since. There's other people writing about um, drag, but a lot of it's about drag queens. Of course, RuPaul and all of that sort of culture is much more geared to drag performance by drag queens. And it's that interesting thing that um, I'm I'm quite comfortable with the word queer. I use that for myself. Um, so I write about queer identity and queer topics in my own life, but it's not the only thing about me. It's just another layer of my being. So yeah, does that answer your question?
No,
It's
I think
just a part of
that was
who
a
I
great
am.
answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. D. Monica says, "Beautiful, amazing job, sister." And Diana says, "Bravo," with a lot of hearts.
Thank you.
All right. I think with that, we will wrap up. Thank you again, Belinda, so much for coming.
And thank you. This was something I've been looking forward to for a long time, and it was wonderful to do this. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm really glad we were able to do it.
Yeah, me too.
Um, yeah. If anyone would like to purchase Belinda's book, you can check out shadowpawpress.com or look for it at your local bookstores such as Turning the Tide or McNally Robinson in Saskatoon or the Penny University in Regina. And I'd like to say thank you again to our funders, Creative Saskatchewan, Canada Council of the Arts, Department of Canadian Heritage, um, for helping make Book Week possible, and everyone in the audience. And one more thank you to Belinda. Thank you very much. That was great.
Thank you to everyone too. This was lovely.
All right. And that's also Book Week. So thanks. Big wrap up thank you to everyone who were at the events, watched the live streams. Um, from SaskBooks to you guys, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Good night, everyone. Thank you again.